My name is Baruch Barzel. I am a professor of applied mathematics at Bar Ilan University in Israel. My upbringing was as a physicist, and I was intrigued by applications of physics to what are considered non-physical systems. This is what brought me to network science. So as the pandemic erupted and we were all sitting in lockdown here in Israel, we gathered together, all the lab, and we started thinking about out-of-the-box ways to get out of this mess. And we came up with what I think is a very simple idea, but the models show that it works exceptionally well. The idea is alternating quarantine. How does it work? First of all, you partition society into two groups, the red cohort and the blue cohort. And then you have these groups alternating between activity and quarantine in weekly succession. First of all, you partition the population into two non-interacting cohorts. So you dilute the interacting population. Classes, buses, workplaces, they're all half full. You have half the interactions. And then each of these cohorts only works for a week at a time. So you also dilute the interaction duration. But here's the second point. The second point, this was true for any epidemic, but the second point is tailored specifically for COVID-19. And I think in your question, this is what you were alluding to. The problem with this virus is that you become infectious slightly before the onset of symptoms. So if it takes roughly 1 week to show symptoms, already within 3 or 4 days, you start infecting others. And at this stage, at the pre-symptomatic stage, you're an invisible spreader. Imagine Sarah, who's in the blue group, and she went to work in week number 1. Now, she might have gotten infected. Within a few days, she will reach her most dangerous phase, her peak infectious phase, where she's an invisible spreader. But here's the point. Within a few days, she will also enter her quarantine cycle. I think that there are 3 challenges that we need to talk about. One is, what about people who are non-cooperators? I mean, we know that people cheat. And how does the method sustain when people are non-cooperative? So we introduced defectors. These defectors can be either cheaters who do not want to cooperate with the policy, or people who are essential workers and cannot cooperate with the policy. And our models have shown that even with 10, 15, under good conditions, even sometimes 20% defection levels, the alternating quarantine still performs very well in mitigating the disease. Now, the second thing that people ask us a lot is, how do you partition society? I mean, you have a country, it's such a big chunk of people. How are you going to cut them into 2 cohorts and make sure that there's no cross-infection between them? And the answer to this is that it's much simpler than it sounds. And let me just tell you the story. Imagine that Israel tomorrow decides that alternating quarantine is the policy they want to implement. So they don't have to do it right now. They need to give us some time to get arranged. So it's now 16, sorry. It's now March 16. Let's assume that the country says in April 1st, we're going to start alternating quarantine. So April 1st, no, it's not Fool's Day, it's the real thing, okay? So on April 1st, they give you a deadline. By April 1st, the schedule starts. So as an individual or as an employer, I have time to kind of think and get arranged, get the supplies and whatever I need to cooperate with this schedule. Now, how do you partition society? Well, you need, first of all, to partition people based on households. Now there are 2 weeks. There's a website that they launch. And within these 2 weeks, I need to scratch my head and see if this schedule works for me. And if for any reason I want to switch from red to blue, that's fine. All I need to do is log into the website, no questions asked, and just inform them that I have switched. And then what happens on April 1st? In April 1st, everything is frozen. You cannot switch cohorts anymore, and we start the routine. So by April 1st, what you get is a society that is fully partitioned based on households, where pretty much everyone got their preferred schedule. Now, how can I be so flexible? Well, the reason is I want to be flexible because I want to have this as smooth as possible. We want the socioeconomic activity to go back. So I don't want this to be stressful, not for the individuals, not for the employers. That's why I want to be flexible. The reason I can be so flexible is very simple. It's because I do not need an exact partition. It doesn't have to be exactly 50-50. If by the end of this process, 47% are blue and 53% are red, That's fine. There are good news on that and bad news. The good news is that once we published this, even as a very crude article in the archive, it garnered a tremendous level of interest from media and from policymakers. I think we talked with something like 14 or 15 different governments who expressed interest in this. In the end, we learned something about the difference between politics and science, and no country implemented this as a national level strategy like we hoped. We know today that in our interconnected world, the next pandemic is just a matter of time. And while in COVID-19 we all improvised, I think there should be an expectation that if a mutation comes through or another variant or another scare, another spread, we should already have plans in place and we should make them now, not once the virus is there. What we suggest is that the plan that we should have already think about and all the details of how to implement it is precisely this. So when the next virus comes through, we have the alternating quarantine all thought through and we can just press the button and make it go.